Uh-oh.
Jimi Hendrix placed his guitar in the front seat and then proceeded to sit in the back. The guitar was the Monterey Strat, by the way, which he played almost exclusively at Golden Gate Park. Despite being the hottest new act in popular music on that summer day, June 25, 1967, he was traveling alone without any entourage. In fact, when Jeffrey McMeans knocked on the door of room 152 at the Travelodge near Fisherman's Wharf, he was surprised to discover Hendrix quietly waiting by himself to be picked up. Just an hour prior, McMeans, a 24-year-old San Francisco State student, was at a meeting in the psychedelic shop on Haight Street, volunteering his time in support of an on-the-fly free concert in Golden Gate Park. When shop co-owner Ylle asked if anyone had a car, McMeans raised his hand. Soon after, he was chauffeuring Hendrix back across town in his dilapidated vehicle, a 1959 Studebaker with holes in the ragtop roof, on a foggy Sunday afternoon. As they headed south through the city toward the Haight-Ashbury, Hendrix sat in the back seat, shy and polite, wearing a black and gold Victorian-era military jacket that he had found in a second-hand clothing store in London. McMeans was also sporting some vintage apparel of his own, in the form of a woman's fur that he had fashioned into some sort of Davy Crockett cap crossed with a Russian babushka headpiece. Hendrix couldn't help but comment on how cool it was. "I tried to give it to him," McMeans explained to Skate recently by phone, but he declined, saying it wouldn't fit over his hair. The two arrived at the Panhandle on Fell Street near Ashbury, where a crowd of about 200 people had already started to gather around a flatbed truck that would serve as a makeshift outdoor stage. Hendrix pulled up and boom, it was on, says author and longtime SF Chronicle culture writer Joel Selvin. It was all a reflection of what San Francisco was like in 1966 and early 67. It was the center of the rock music universe, and things happened as if by spontaneous combustion. During that first weekend of the Summer of Love, Hendrix's free show in the Panhandle was not only a unique moment in one of the most exciting chapters of his career, but also an event which embodied everything that was organic and wonderful about the Haight-Ashbury scene at its peak, the high water mark, as Hunter S. Thompson would famously reflect a few years later, just before the wave finally broke and rolled back. June of 1967 was the month when everything came together for Jimi Hendrix. It began in swinging London, where he was wrapping up a dizzying 8-month excursion that saw him, in this particular order, outshine guitar god Eric Clapton, change his stage name from Jimmy James to Jimi Hendrix, form a band, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, begin touring, appear on British television and record his trailblazing debut album Are You Experienced? Hendrix put an exclamation point on this prolific run when he played at a London theatre owned by Beatles manager Brian Epstein on June 4, with the Fab Four in attendance. He even opened the show with a blistering cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, just days after the Beatles had released the album. Collectively, Hendrix's European sojourn was more than just a successful strategy for launching his career. It was a feedback-driven counterpoint to the British invasion, reminding the likes of Clapton, Paul McCartney and Mick Jagger that rock and roll was ultimately rooted in the black art form of the American blues and that Hendrix was its sonic torchbearer. In a more immediate sense, he was simply the best guitarist that they had ever seen. As he departed Europe, Are You Experienced? Chased Sgt. Pepper up the English music charts, ranking second behind the Beatles' first-place slot. Though the album wouldn't be released to the American market until August, Hendrix set his sights on making a similar impact stateside and was booked for a run of shows in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. Yet for their very first appearance in the US, the Experience was slated for the Monterey Pop Festival alongside a list act such as Otis Redding, The Who, Jefferson Airplane and Grateful Dead. After a notorious backstage incident in which The Who successfully lobbied not to have to play after Hendrix, the Experience delivered one of the seminal performances in rock and roll history, which famously culminated in Jimi lighting his guitar on fire before an awestruck crowd. San Francisco was next. In the coming days, Hendrix was scheduled for a series of shows at Bill Graham's Fillmore Auditorium as the opening act on a bill beneath Hungarian guitarist Gabor Sobo and Haight-Ashbury rock royalty Jefferson Airplane. Although his album wasn't available in America yet, Hendrix already had a buzz around him as he arrived in San Francisco. KMPX, the local station which every hip person listened to, had an English copy of Are You Experienced, and they were pounding every track, Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, Red House, Selvin said. So when the airplane showed up to play that first Fillmore gig, the entire place was there to see Hendrix. And he wiped the floor with them. Just like The Who, Jefferson Airplane quickly realized they couldn't follow Hendrix and abruptly dropped from the lineup to purportedly honor some phantom commitment in Los Angeles. Scrambling to fill the vacancy, Bill Graham reached out to on-the-rise local act Big Brother and the holding company. This put Hendrix and Janis Joplin on the same bill for a stunning run of 10 shows in 1 week, and, some insiders suggest, resulted in a tryst between the two stars backstage at the Fillmore one evening. For many in attendance, it was the first time they ever encountered Hendrix and his music. "We knew the name, but we really didn't have any idea what his music was," says Steve Lavaroni, a local high school student at the time who attended one of the Fillmore concerts with his older brother. "We were just in amazement at the cacophony of sounds coming from his guitar. We had grown up seeing all the big San Francisco bands of that era, but Hendrix was just unlike any of them." As the week progressed, Hendrix went from an obscure opening act to a must-see headliner. "He did 2 sets a night and he was just stunning everybody who saw it," Selvin says. "People were walking out of those Fillmore shows breathless." In many ways, Hendrix's free concert in the Panhandle at the end of that week was a sort of victory lap, a light-hearted and spontaneous afternoon outing in the park after conquering the high-stakes shows before the masses at Monterey and the hip kids at the Fillmore. The event kicked off shortly after Hendrix emerged from Jeffrey McMean's junk show Studebaker on the north side of Fell Street. Local outfit Ace of Cups, a pioneering all-female rock band, took the stage as the opening act. Meanwhile, Hendrix met up with experienced bandmates Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell behind the stage, drinking cans of Lucky Lager and smoking cigarettes. Hendrix also chatted with longtime colleague and future drummer Buddy Miles, whom he knew going back to his early days as a guitarist for hire on the black music Chitlin circuit. Legendary photographer Jim Marshall, who exactly 1 week earlier had taken a now iconic photograph of Jimi lighting his guitar on fire at Monterey, was on hand with multiple Lakers dangling from his neck. He took photos of Jimi and the other musicians mingling with those in attendance and grooving along to the Ace of Cups opening set. Jimi was clearly a fan. "At some point Jimi and Buddy were standing right in front of us while we were playing," recalls Ace of Cups guitarist Denise Kaufman. Later, when he went back to Europe, he told Melody Maker magazine that we were one of his favorite bands that he encountered while touring in America. All of the gear on the flatbed truck, from the amps to the drum kit, belonged to the Ace of Cups. Having watched Hendrix destroy his equipment at Monterey, some of the band members grew nervous about sharing it with him. "We finally had some equipment that was brand new to us," Kaufman told Skate, "and I remember our lead guitarist, Mary Ellen, being a little worried. But Hendrix kind of picked up on it and said, 'Don't worry, I'll take really good care of your equipment.'" So on a foggy summer afternoon, in front of a few hundred spectators, Hendrix and his bandmates participated in the recent though robust Haight-Ashbury tradition of performing for free on a narrow strip of Golden Gate Park in the heart of the city. "It was another day at the carnival," says SF local Rusty Goldman, who watched the Hendrix show that day under the influence of LSD. "There were different bands playing all the time, it was word on the street, and if you were a local you would catch wind of them, whether it was in the Panhandle or Speedway Meadow or wherever." A case study to this dynamic, McMeans had smoked a joint in his car until he couldn't see out the windows and then proceeded to position himself at center stage. Marshall even took a photo of Hendrix in which McMeans can clearly be seen near his feet wearing his custom-made babushka and looking up in awe while laconically holding onto the microphone cord. Unsurprisingly, perhaps after 55 years, no one can seem to remember the specific songs that Hendrix played that day, though his better documented shows from that era are heavy on Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, Hey Joe, The Wind Cries Mary, and a hefty cover of Chip Taylor's Wild Thing, not to mention his trademark theatrics, from playing guitar with his teeth to behind his head. In all, about 300 to 400 people watched him perform that afternoon, and its mention still invokes strong memories to the old-time San Franciscans who were in attendance. Hendrix concluded his run at the Fillmore later that evening, and then departed SF for Los Angeles the next day. His summer eventually took a strange twist when his management booked him as the opening act for the Monks, a ludicrous pairing which only held together for 7 shows. The Haight-Ashbury scene took a bad turn in the coming weeks and months. The combination of youthful word of mouth, increased media coverage, and the song San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair, written by Los Angeles musician John Phillips, drove thousands to the neighborhood from all corners of the country. For all of its positive-sounding optics, the Summer of Love really signified the downward trend of the culture in the Haight. "The streets just filled up with people we had never seen before," says Selvin, "and they lined the sidewalks. Spare change became the mantra. There was a lot of hostility with the police and even open violence, something that was simply antithetical to the whole hippie movement." Although the exact timing of the decline of the Haight-Ashbury subculture is a highly subjective matter, other events support the late '67 timeline. By October, the Lynn brothers shuttered the psychedelic shop, declaring the hippie movement dead and staging a makeshift funeral procession through the neighborhood. Many integral members of the culture began relocating around this time, such as Big Brother bassist Peter Albin, who left the Haight when a mugger put a knife to his wife's throat. Most telling perhaps, was that one of the new arrivals that summer was an eccentric fellow named Charles Manson. Within this timeline, Hendrix's showing in the Panhandle was nearly a last call of sorts, a still groovy calm right before the storm. The free Hendrix concert was almost the last moment of everything that was so magical and wonderful about San Francisco in '66 and early '67, says Selvin. Things almost seemed to change the very next week, and then right away the dream was over. Jimi was such a hit with the hippies and the young people in attendance, he really wowed everyone with his set and superb playing. It is such a shame that Hendrix was taken from us so soon. Can you imagine what gems he might have come up with later on in his career? Well, maybe the reason he is so popular still today is that he left us so soon. There is the possibility that his music may have changed over time, who knows? Still, for generations of guitarists, Jimi remains the king of the hill and literally always tops the charts of players who were an influence. So many guitarists reference him and his playing as a huge influence. Rest in peace, Jimi, you were one of a kind.